Hello, and thank you for joining us. My name is Kelsey Haven, and I am part of the team for the I-35 and Santa Fe Corridor Improvements Project. This is a pre-recorded presentation for the public meeting opportunities that will be hosted in person and live virtual meetings on April 26, 2022. This presentation will last approximately 30 minutes. If you are joining us during the live virtual event, we will open the virtual chat for questions and comments after the presentation. The project team will read your question or comment aloud and answer verbally. If you are a call-in user and do not have access to the chat, please hit *9 to raise your hand and the team will take you off mute. We also have a Spanish translator available if you prefer to submit your comments in Spanish. If you're joining us from the on-demand opportunity, please visit www.olathe.ks.org/Santa Fe and find the comment form under the public meeting section of the webpage. A project team member will respond as needed. We'll also have a QR code later in the presentation to take you directly to the link. Thank you again for joining us, and I will now pass this over to Teresa Vink, Assistant City Engineer with the City of Olathe.
Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. As Kelsey mentioned, my name is Teresa Vink, and I am the Assistant City Engineer here at the City of Olathe. I'm here today to introduce and discuss much needed improvements along the Santa Fe corridor. Santa Fe from Ridgeview to Merlin, including the interchange at I-35, holds the highest crash rate and most congestion in the City of Olathe. Due to this, the city is evaluating alternatives to improve this area. We are looking to improve safety and reduce congestion and travel times along the corridor. Traffic along the corridor has significantly increased since the project was constructed and now carries a little over 40,000 vehicles per day. Along with heavy traffic, crash rates along the corridor are 6 times the national average. The exhibit here displays the areas of heaviest congestion along the corridor. These areas include the ramp terminals of the interstate and the intersection of Santa Fe and Claiborne Road. Santa Fe and Ridgeview is also shown as a highly congested area, only because this map was created prior to the recent improvements that were completed in 2020. Since those improvements, the number of crashes in a 2-year period has decreased from 92 to 15, and the crash index has gone from 2.6 to 0.8 at that intersection. As I mentioned before, the corridor carries around 40,000 vehicles per day, and volumes are projected to increase by nearly 15% by 2050. Additionally, I-35 at Santa Fe carries nearly 14,000 commercial trucks daily, which is one of the highest volumes in the region. Another area that we'll be focused on will be access along the corridor. Currently, there are 30 uncontrolled access points along the corridor, and this can be compared to only 10 along 119th Street near I-35. The design team will evaluate areas where access control is needed to increase the safety of the corridor. So just a little bit on the background of this project. The project actually started back in 2019 when a study began to establish the overall vision for the Santa Fe corridor. As part of this, a stakeholder meeting was held to gather input and a public survey was conducted. The survey asked for input on corridor concerns. 87% of those who responded to the survey noted safety or congestion as a #1 priority along Santa Fe. And in January 2021, the City Council approved the project to move forward with conceptual and preliminary design. And in June of 2021, the team began the environmental assessment. As I mentioned on the previous slide, the corridor study was conducted and identified 8 goals. These goals included improve safety along the corridor, consolidate direct access to Santa Fe, increase capacity along the corridor and at the I-35 interchange, reduce travel time along the corridor, improve transportation choices along the corridor and provide connectivity for active transportation over I-35, evaluate economic vitality and placemaking opportunities, recommend logical phases for the proposed improvements, and optimize traffic signal performance between Ridgeview and Merlin. The top priority was identified as increasing the capacity along the corridor and at the I-35 interchange. And this was followed by reducing travel times along the corridor and optimizing traffic signal performance. Another part of the study was to identify top areas of concern. The exhibit here shows the responses of where and what concern are priorities. As you can see, each color represents a specific concern. Safety was noted as the top concern at the I-35 exit ramps, and congestion was noted as a top concern between Ridgeview and Lindenwood. Congestion was also shown as a top concern at Santa Fe and Ridgeview, but again, this was prior to the improvements in the area, and we've seen a significant reduction in congestion at the intersection since its completion in 2020. Crash rates and the crash index have also declined significantly. Based on preliminary work and input gathered during the study, the city is moving forward to evaluate transportation infrastructure improvement alternatives. In order to be eligible for federal funding, the first step to complete a project of this size is to conduct a NEPA environmental assessment of the project corridor to review improvement alternatives. Potential improvements that may be considered and evaluated during the environmental process include, but are not limited to, interchange reconfiguration, Santa Fe corridor widening, and local access and circulation. I will now turn the presentation over to Kyle Kroner with HNTB to discuss the NEPA process.
Under the Federal National Environmental Policy Act of 1969, or NEPA, projects that have or that may involve federal funding or require a federal action must evaluate potential impacts to the natural and man-made environment. For this project, the evaluation will be conducted and documented in an environmental assessment, or EA. EAs are designed to help agencies, elected officials, and the public make sound decisions. The environmental process for this project began back in June 2021 and is expected to be completed by the summer of 2023. The public will be informed of progress of the status of the project at key milestones. This will also provide the opportunity for the public to provide input. The NEPA boundary is essentially a study area. The NEPA boundary extends from west of Ridgeview to east of Merlin, and from as far south as Elm Street up to just north of Spruce Street. This boundary defines the project area for which associated NEPA analyses may take place. It does not mean that the entire study area will be directly impacted by this project. The environmental process, or the NEPA process, is a long process and it has multiple steps. The first part of that process is creating what we call the purpose and need for the project. And I'll talk a little bit about this in a few minutes. And that's where we are here in this process. The second step here is the alternatives development and screening, which is where we develop the ideas for solving the transportation solutions and determine which are most feasible to move forward with. The third is the environmental assessment and Section 4F evaluation. That's where we determine what the social, economic, and environmental impacts of the potential project are. The fourth step is determining what the preferred alternative for the project is, or essentially identifying the alternative that is the preferred corridor improvements. The fifth step is the formal review by the public and government agencies, where the public is offered the opportunity to provide comment and input on what the preferred alternative is. And the sixth step is finalizing the environmental assessment and Federal Highway Administration making a decision on what the project should be. You heard me mention previously the purpose and need for the project. A purpose and need statement describes the transportation problems that a proposed project is to address. This statement provides a description of the purpose of the I-35 and Santa Fe Street corridor project and demonstrates the need for improvements in the proposed project area. The purpose of the proposed improvements is to improve safety and to accommodate increased travel demands at the I-35 and Santa Fe Street interchange, and then the broader Santa Fe Street corridor from Ridgeview Road to Merlin Road. The proposed improvements are needed to improve existing safety conditions through improved traffic operations, geometric improvements, and conformity with state and local access management policies, and to improve existing and future traffic operations at the I-35 and Santa Fe Street interchange ramp terminals and at intersections in the Santa Fe corridor, and to accommodate transportation mode choices and active transportation modes over I-35 in the corridor, and finally, to support land use planning for economic development and redevelopment and growth.
Thank you, Kyle. As we move forward with the NEPA process, we appreciate and need your input. As Kyle mentioned, there's multiple steps throughout the NEPA process where your input is, where we will be reaching out to you again for input. But for now, we really would appreciate your needed input on any information that you've seen in the presentation. So please provide any input on the project, uses of the corridor. Do you have any ideas on any additions or changes to the purpose and need for the project, or are there any additional concepts that the project team should think about? Please visit our project website at olathes.org/Santa Fe to provide input and comments. And on the website, there will be a link to a comment form along with a copy of this presentation for your reference. So what's next with the project? The team will begin to evaluate and narrow down the corridor and interchange alternatives. We will host another public meeting to be held in the fall of 2022 to gather input on the alternatives for the corridor. And the team will begin to evaluate federal grant funding opportunities for the project. So the schedule shown today outlines the NEPA process and preliminary design continuing through the first quarter of 2023. And based on the information that we have at this time, we expect to see federal grant opportunities arise in the second and third quarters of 2022, 2023, and 2024. Again, thank you so much for joining us today. My contact information is provided. Please feel free to reach out regarding any questions or comments on this project. Questions and comments can also be submitted through the project website at olathes.org/Santa Fe. And along with a link to a comment form, you can also use this location to sign up for project updates. The QR code shown on the screen will take you to the comment form as well. We will now open up the webinar for comments and questions. Please type all questions into the chat box below. And if you are a call-in user, please press *9 to raise your hand. Thank you.